Ontario cottage market just recorded its lowest sales volume in years, and the 2026 data says it's about to get a lot worse.
Country, we're talking like, the Muskoka, Parry Sound, Haliburton, that general area, came in around 991 units for the year, down 12%. Officially, Dan, a buyer's market in Ontario cottage country right now.
Ontario's cottage market just hit a 20-year sales low, and the politicians who wrecked the broader economy caused it. 991 waterfront sales closed across Muskoka, Parry Sound, and Haliburton in 2025, down 12% from the year before. Forecasts are calling for another 10 to 15% decline in 2026. That puts Ontario's cottage country at the lowest transaction volume in over 2 decades. Kearney, Macklem, and Ford all have fingerprints on this.
CREA and Habestat are tracking another 10 to 15% decline this year. Do that math, you're looking at somewhere around 840 to 890 sales. And that is in Ontario's core cottage country.
Start with the inventory numbers, because they tell the full story of how fast this market flipped. In 2021, Muskoka Waterfront had 2.4 months of inventory, a seller's market where properties moved in days and bidding wars happened on a Tuesday. By 2025, that figure climbed to 14.5 months of inventory, a 131% increase since 2022. For context, a balanced market sits at 5 to 6 months. Everything above that favors buyers. At 14.5 months, sellers are not competing with other listings. They are competing with time. And time is expensive when you are carrying a waterfront property with a mortgage at 5%.
In Muskoka, Ontario's cottage country, some pandemic buyers are just now finding out the hard way that you can't always just sell it when you're done with the cottage or when your payments jump.
Yeah, and here's a stat that should make some of you sit up. 57% of Canadian cottage owners say that they cannot afford to keep their cottage.
Tiff Macklem built this trap personally. He held rates at emergency lows of 0.25% through 2021, told Canadians to go out and borrow, and watched the cottage market explode. Buyers who would never have considered a $1.5 million waterfront property suddenly qualified for one. Prices across Ontario's recreational market fell 5% in 2025 to a median of $809,900 for waterfront properties, but that is after years of decline from the 2022 peak.
Back in 2016, we had 7.8 months of inventory. Cottages are interesting because you're always going to have the on and off seasons where they do drop off, and you're going to see that here as the charts ebb and flow. During that 2021-2022 timeframe, we had less than 1 month of cottage inventory. Everybody was...
In Muskoka specifically, the median sale price dropped 13% year over year in Q1 2026, from $689,500 to $601,133. Properties are now sitting on the market for an average of 95 days, up from 63 days the year before. Every single one of those people who bought at the peak did so because Macklem told them rates would stay low for the foreseeable future. They did not.
Trees up there, and it's not just about the cottage country market anymore.
Yeah, I mean, just here in Ontario, because if we're looking at the likes of Muskoka, Haliburton, the Kawarthas, some very popular cottage country here, there's a red flag, and that's for the entire real estate market across Canada.
Now here is the part that connects directly to Kearney's trade war failure. Cottages are discretionary purchases. When people feel uncertain about their jobs, their portfolio, and the direction of the economy, a waterfront property in Muskoka is the first thing that gets quietly shelved. In January 2025, as tariff discussions intensified, CREA data showed new listings jumped 11%, the largest seasonally adjusted monthly supply increase since the late 1980s, while sales fell 3.3% in the same period. CREA's senior economist Sean Cathcart said the timing leaves little doubt as to the cause: uncertainty around tariffs. 1 month of trade war noise wiped out buyer confidence across an entire segment of the real estate market. That is how fragile this was. and Carney has not resolved the tariff situation in over a year.
Bought the average cottage for $342,000 in 2016. We obviously went a little nuts in Kawarthas here. In 2022, we peaked out at $778. So we more than doubled the average cottage price.
The buyer pipeline data makes the outlook even worse. Online search volume for Ontario cottage and waterfront properties is currently sitting at roughly 50% of the 2021 peak. This search index leads actual transaction volume by 1 to 2 quarters, meaning when high-intent buyers stop searching, sales follow within months. At half the peak search volume with no visible recovery trend, the buyers are not coming back fast. They are sitting on the sidelines watching an economy in recession, a trade war unresolved, and mortgage rates that are not dropping meaningfully. And the cottage sellers are the ones absorbing that weight.
Listen, when second homes become unaffordable, it's not just a luxury market cracking, right? It's a sign that even the most comfortable Canadians are getting a bit stretched, and that's where things start cracking.
Parry Sound and Haliburton show exactly what this looks like when the data hits the ground. Parry Sound recorded 373 waterfront sales in 2025, still running approximately 31% below long-term historical norms. Weakness was evident across all price ranges. Even the luxury waterfront segment above $2 million saw declining sales. Properties there are selling at 93.5 cents on the dollar after sellers had already cut asking prices before going to contract. They dropped the price and then still had to negotiate down further at the offer table. Haliburton's average sale price has fallen from a 2022 high of $1,042,317 to around $700,000 now. Active listings are 132.9% above the 5-year average. That is not a correction. That is a generational repricing of a market that was artificially inflated by cheap money and then abandoned when the policy changed overnight.
In the country, here north of Toronto in Newmarket, Ontario, a single mother bought this home behind me back in 2017. Now desperate to sell, for months she struggled to even get a single offer.
I have to basically beg people to come and just even look at the house. I've been struggling.
The termination data is the part that is not making headlines, and it should be. Sellers across cottage country are listing properties, watching them sit for months, pulling the listing in frustration, relaunching at lower prices with fresh photos to make it look like a new listing, and ultimately landing at prices they could have gotten on day 30 if they had started there. Termination volume in 2025 hit near its highest level in years, multiple times above the historical average. Every terminated listing represents a seller who went in with 2022 expectations, got a 2026 reality check, and burned 3 months of selling season in the process. And the market is not done correcting yet. Forecasts for 2026 call for prices to drop another 8%, supply to increase another 8%, and sales volume to fall another 10 to 15%. The bottom is not in.
So how long is it actually going to take to sell one of your cottages if you're out in this area? And you can see the baseline is up and down like all the other categories, but we are talking about 82 days right now, 33% increase in time that it's going to actually take to sell your cottage in the Kawarthas right now.
The cottage market did not collapse purely because of interest rates and tariffs. Government policy decisions accelerated this collapse at every level. Doug Ford, Justin Trudeau's federal government before Carney, and now Carney's own administration all made decisions that changed the carrying cost math for cottage owners. And most of those owners had no idea the rules were changing until it was too late. Start with the short-term rental crackdown, because it directly changed the financial viability of owning a cottage for thousands of families. As municipalities across Ontario cottage country introduced licensing requirements and restrictions on short-term rentals, one rental company owner confirmed his inventory of cottages available for rent dropped by over 50% in a single year. These were not reckless investors. These were families who bought cottages, partly because rental income would help cover the mortgage. Doug Ford's government stood by while municipality after municipality rewrote the rules, and the federal government actively funded that crackdown.
Our inventory of cottages has reduced by a little over 50% this year, so we've lost just over half of our owners, and it's a trend we're seeing across the market up here.
And what are they saying to you about why they've pulled their listings?
Most of them have pulled strictly expressly because of the short-term rental bylaw, combination of costs and just complexity of the program.
The federal government committed $50 million to help municipalities crack down on short-term rentals, explicitly to push listings off Airbnb and VRBO and back into the long-term market. Then on top of that, Ottawa introduced a tax rule in late 2023 that banned Airbnb deductions in municipalities with short-term rental restrictions, removing the ability to deduct interest expenses and other operating costs, starting January 2024.
What I'm finding is the investment owners on Airbnb are still renting. It's a palatable cost. They spread over dozens and dozens of bookings. The most impacted are families that only rent a handful of weeks each year to, pay for upgrades to the cottage, new docks, decks, that kind of thing.
So the federal government funded the municipal crackdowns and then removed the tax benefits for anyone still trying to make a rental property work. The carrying cost math broke for thousands of cottage owners simultaneously. Some listed and got out. Many more are still holding properties that no longer cash flow and are worth significantly less than what they paid.
Municipalities say they put in these rules to enforce building regulations, fire codes, and other aspects mostly to do with safety. What do you think of that?
I think it's a good idea. There is, good parts of the bylaw. I'm not against short-term rental licensing. There are some good aspects to that.
By 2025, short-term rental rules across Ontario required owners to limit rentals to primary residences in many municipalities, introduced mandatory licensing, registration numbers, and detailed compliance standards. Fees in cottage country townships range from $500 to $750 annually for an STR license, with additional requirements for parking plans, garbage disposal rules, and fire safety inspections.
Especially for controlling problem properties and giving municipalities a mechanism to kind of get those problem properties out of the market. But the devil's in the details, and it's too expensive when you add up the cost of licensing and additional fees that go along with it.
Several places imposed minimum 7-night stay requirements, specifically to eliminate weekend rentals. Every one of those requirements was a layer of friction added to a business model that cottage investors had relied on when they made their purchase decisions. Nobody told them the rules were going to change. The rules changed anyway.
Overly complex process to apply for a license.
For people who don't have a cottage that they rent out, what is a problem property?
A problem property would be a 3-bedroom cottage where the owner allows 16 people in, it's 20-year-olds having a party, music all night,
right.
Issues such as that.
The non-resident speculation tax landed on top of all of this. The federal foreign buyer ban extended to 2027 compressed demand at the higher end of the cottage market, where non-resident buyers had historically provided a floor. The federal government extended the foreign buyer ban on Canadian homes to 2027. In isolation, that might seem unrelated to Muskoka. In practice, it removed a category of buyer that had been supporting prices in the premium segment for years, and it arrived exactly when the market needed demand the most.
Cottage rentals in Haliburton, I understand, are listed on Airbnb anywhere from around $200 to $500 a night. The fee, I understand, is $500. The municipal fee is $500. So is it the new fees that are too prohibitive, or is it something more?
It is. The initial fee is $500 for a license. There's other additional fees. For example, if you don't own your shore allowance, there's another $750 annual fee and extra insurance you have to acquire.
Now the mortgage renewal wave is about to push more forced sellers into an already oversupplied market. Realtors in cottage country are warning that a continuing wave of mortgage renewals to higher rates could drive owners to sell and bring prices down further in 2026, particularly for lower-priced homes where owners are more likely to carry a loan. The families who bought at 1.5% in 2021 are now renewing at 4 to 5%. Their monthly payments jumped 20 to 25%. Their cottage is worth 30% less than what they paid. And the rental income they counted on to cover costs has been regulated away by municipal licensing requirements that Doug Ford's government waved through. They are trapped.
We've heard people and clients say, like, we thought this would be our retreat, and now it's becoming like one of the biggest stresses in our life.
The Globe and Mail's forecast for 2026 cottage country projects: prices dropping 8%, supply increasing 8%, and sales volume falling another 10 to 15%. Total dollar volume across the cottage market is expected to fall 15 to 20% this year. The segment carrying the most exposure is anything under $3 million on smaller or less popular lakes, and anything more than 3 hours from the GTA. That covers the majority of cottage owners in Ontario. The ultra-luxury segment, above $10 million on the recognized Muskoka Lakes, is largely insulated because those buyers are mostly cash. Everyone else is in a market that keeps getting worse, while the politicians who created the conditions responsible for this refuse to acknowledge any of it.
Like, people who were buying during COVID, if you've never looked at a cottage before, like, you thought, oh, cottage is selling a week because that's how long it took me to buy the one that I, you know. Yeah. And now all of a sudden you're dealing with this exit liquidity and you're like, why is it taking 7 months rather than 7 days?
Carney has made no specific announcement addressing the cottage market collapse. Ford has made no specific announcement addressing the STR policy damage. And Macklem, whose rate decisions lit the fuse on this entire situation, is busy explaining to parliamentary committees that interest rates are not responsible for the housing crisis. CREA's own senior economist said the tariff uncertainty left little doubt it was the cause of the demand collapse in early 2025. The trade war Carney has failed to resolve for over a year is sitting directly on top of an already broken recreational property market, pushing buyers further to the sidelines every single month it goes unresolved.